something. Change of mode would be good. Yeah.
And when we arpeggiate, and we start with a time in the position, and we arpeggiate through the course of the piano steps, can we end up with a 1/64? That would be incorrect.
You're talking about arpeggiating the bass?
Well, say you're arpeggiating, the treble and the bass clef, together, you got to run or something like that.
Or you're talking about when you say arpeggio, like.
In our elementary form of writing that we know of, and the mistakes that we make a run, say we make a run with a tonic in group position or even in first version. But then as we go up the run, maybe.
Oh, it becomes the 6/4.
It becomes 6/4. That is it.
That's okay.
That's okay in a run, in a sense.
But I'm not sure if I'm understanding your sense of run, but
Yeah.
yeah, you could. There's a 6/4. Yeah, that's all. But you wouldn't want to end there.
Okay.
You wouldn't want to arpeggiate and then just have like a half note
Okay.
on the 6/4.
All right.
That would emphasize it too. Yes.
We don't put pedal on our sheet music, but Stephen's also the
What we could do, it depends if we have time. I'd like to, he's putting pedal. When you pedal on the piano, the general idea is you hold the pedal down, and that keeps everything sustained until the harmony changes. So if you've got a tonic harmony like this, and then it changes to subdominant, then you lift on the subdominant. So he's good enough to see where the chords are changing, but we didn't really talk about that very much. Exception to that would be if there's staccato written, then you would not use a pedal. So if you'll remind me when you get to that, I'll be glad to talk about pedal, and we can write some in, and I'll show you how to do. There are a number of ways. The traditional, I think, finale or whatever you got here, the word PED, and then an asterisk is where the pedal lifts. So the sustain would be along here. Sometimes if the chord changes very rapidly, it looks like that. But if there's some other ways to do it, there's a new way that's kind of like this. It's just trying to look cool, but it's the kind of movement of the pedal, like that. But if could be important, for example, an arpeggio. If you play with this without a pedal, see how it all just disappears. But if you put the pedal on, it's a completely different. And it all rings out. So sometimes it kind of depends on what you want, and sometimes the pianists just don't know whether you want it or not. So they just do whatever they do. But if you'll help remind me when we get there, we can talk about it, especially if you have any questions about it. And sometimes the pedal is just very physical. In other words, you want this sound, and then you want it to change to this. So there's no way to do that without hit this. You have to raise the hands all the way up there to the top, and then you lift the pedal just as you hit the second chord. So in that case, it's just to connect the note. Any other question on it? Beginning class today, one of the students said, my title presidential, and the other said it looked British. So I said, well, that's so I'm running for president of England.
I tied it just right to where one of the things is in the knot, the center of the knot.
It almost looks like a Venetian flag a little bit. That's what I thought initially.
When I'm president of England, everyone will
The
have
white
to wear
shirt
one.
behind it.
Yeah.
When I'm president of England, everyone will have. I'm going to change it.
Yeah, well, they have a prime minister.
They used to have prime rib.
All right, page 317. 317, this is the chapter, this is the bottom drawer, chords and progressions. It's a special situation where when he changes subject, it has absolutely nothing to do with the previous subject. 317. This is something called chromatic movement. And here's the history of chromatic movement. As you know, the Romantic composers began to want to add more chromaticism to the music, and that would make the listener wonder what key they were in. And this would stir up emotion. That's what the Romantics were about, creating emotion. So they would set up these lines that just constantly move, so the listener, where am I? And then when you finally got to a cadence, it felt much stronger because you weren't sure what key you were in. Well, somewhere along the way, a late Romantic composer asked this question. Well, could I have a chromatic line in the bass or somewhere? Just a chromatic scale and harmonize that in the key of C? Well, you know from us singing the chromatic scale in theory class, we harmonized the chromatic scale. So it is possible that you could, even though you're in one key, like the key of C, you could harmonize an ascending or descending chromatic scale. But that was the question the late Romantics said, what would it sound like if I write this piece and I'm in a key where I'm just moving up by half step and half step and half step? So a lot of these chromatic chords, very handy to have change of mode, secondary dominant, secondary diminished seventh, common tone diminished, and they would use those chords. What would the next step be? Next step would be some composer going, could I get two of the lines moving chromatically? Could I get maybe one line moving up chromatically and one moving down chromatically? Or, and here would be the final one, do you think it would be possible to write an SATB where all four parts moved only in half steps? Oh, wow. Well, that would be really, really, really difficult. Really, yeah, three of them. Really, really, really difficult. But then they backed off a little and said, well, do you think we could get all the parts moving, say, either whole step or half step? Every single part, whole step or half step. And that became a kind of a little mini goal of some Romantic composers. Is it possible to make everything move chromatically? Well, and they experimented. They said, all right, well, let's take all four parts and move them either stepwise or whatever. And some composers like Chopin and Liszt kind of discovered they were able to do it, but then when they stepped back and tried to analyze it, they were going, now what did I do there? How do I tell everybody what I did? If you look at page 317, there's a prelude by Chopin. Has anybody ever heard this? It sounds like a lawnmower.